Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newington Town Council special meeting of Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7. If you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll move on to roll call, please.
Councilor Braverman.
Here.
You're muted.
I am.
Unmute.
I am muted. Councilor Camillo.
Here.
Councilor Donahue.
Here.
Councilor Mankey.
Here.
Councilor Nagel.
Here.
Councilor Page.
Here.
Councilor Rada.
Here.
Mayor Del Buono.
Here. All right, everyone is here. We'll now move on to the next item, which is public participation. On agenda items only, because this is a special meeting, we have to stick to public participation on items on the agenda. We have a 3-minute time limit, and we would ask that you state your name and address for the record when you begin. We do have one letter from the public. It was an email correspondence from Forrest Helvey, and it will be added to the minutes of this meeting. It has been supplied to the clerk. All right, so if you are in the Zoom application, you can raise your hand using the function in the participants window, or if you're on your phone, *9. If you would like to be recognized. We have no one in attendance in the room right now. And no attendees are raising their hands. All right, so we will continue on. Next is remarks by councilors on public participation. I think we're safe to skip that. We'll move into consideration of old business. The first item this evening is fiscal year 2022-2023 proposed budget adjustments. As I mentioned earlier, we did have a public hearing at 6 p.m. this evening where I reviewed a general summary of the budget proposal as made by the town manager and now adopted by this council as their tentative budget so that we may begin working and making adjustments as we see fit. We do have an opportunity to do that now or on April 19th before we set the new mill rate. I can speak for the majority caucus. We have no adjustments this evening and we'll be looking to make our adjustments on the 19th. Minority Leader Page?
I would agree, Mayor. Right now, we're not prepared to present any adjustments. We can do that on the 19th.
Okay, great. So we are all set with that item. We'll move on now to amendment to Chapter 8, Article 6, Environmental Quality Commission. We had received a request from the chair of that commission asking for a change in the membership to that commission. And we are looking this evening to introduce the ordinance and set the public hearing date. So we do have the introduction language in the packet. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko, would you like to read that in for us?
Yes. Introduction. I hereby introduce for the town council's consideration the proposed ordinance amendment to Chapter 8, Boards, Committees, Commissions, and Bureaus, Article 6, Environmental Quality Commission, a copy of which has been filed with the clerk of the council. Resolved that the Newington Town Council hereby schedules a public hearing on April 26, 2022 at 6 o'clock to consider the proposed ordinance amendment, Chapter 8, Boards, Committees, Commissions, and Bureaus, Article 6, Environmental Quality Commission, a copy of which is attached to this resolution.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Mankey. And discussion, I'll just give a quick overview based on the memo that we had received, unless you wanted to do it, Alice. I think the membership was.
Yeah, this has come about over the past couple of years as changes have come in with the responsibilities of town staff. The board found complicated, legislation and deep requirements, whatever. It's felt that town staff has more of the knowledge and expertise and whatever to assume more of the real critical environmental issues that the industry representatives were being tasked with. So as more and more of that responsibility shifted to the town staff, the Environmental Quality Commission really took on more of a role in terms of quality of life within the town of Newington, in terms of in education and engagement with town residents, even the education in schools and population. They've been getting involved with contests, getting students more environmentally aware, reviewing just quality of life issues in town overall. And it's felt that the membership Well, again, as the commission's mission has kind of changed and focus has kind of changed, and as some of the more technical things have really become placed better where they do belong with the town, that it was time to review the membership and the mission of the Environmental Quality Commission. So eliminating the need for the requirement that two of these members be the industry members, and opening up those two positions to more of an environmental focused citizens or residents who want to serve on this committee and can, better go out and do the environmental cheerleading, as well as the studies and, again, quality of life. It's felt that this time for reviewing and revising membership is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And you'll see on the screen, the recommended membership is now 7 electors of the town. It also asks for 2 members of the council to serve as liaison. And the town manager and his or her designee will serve as the staff member for the commission. And so we have the motion on the table. It's been seconded. Is there any further discussion, councilors? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, so we have our public hearing set for April 26th. Okay. Next item is fiscal year 2023 State Historic Documents Grant Program application. As you remember at our last meeting, the town clerk, Mr. Kropinski, had presented to us his plans on how to use the funding that he's applying for and what his intention is for that. Sorry, I have a lot of pages to go through. So what we are looking for tonight is a resolution to authorize the town manager to execute the contract on the Connecticut State Library for Historic Documents Preservation Grant. Would you like to read it?
Resolved that Keith Chapman, town manager or his designee, is authorized to execute and deliver in the name of and on behalf of this municipality an application and contract acceptance with the Connecticut State Library for the Historic Documents Preservation Grant for fiscal year 2023.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Rader. Any discussion on this? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next in our agenda this evening is the annual Fair Housing Month resolution. So since 1993, the town of Newington has been the recipient of grant funding through Small Cities Grant Program. The program assists in funding the town's housing rehabilitation loan program, as well as infrastructure and other improvements to Newington's housing stock. As a recipient of this grant and potential future applicant, the town of Newington documents its commitment to the principles and practices of fair housing by the adoption of an annual fair housing resolution. Once we adopt the resolution, which is our intent this evening, the resolution will be included in the town's Small Cities Fair Housing Plan component. And in addition, the town planner will be forwarding letters to local lenders, and real estate professionals, encouraging their continued commitment to fair housing. We have the resolution attached. Who would like to? Councilor Nagel.
Thank you. Whereas all persons are afforded a right to full and equal housing opportunities in the neighborhood of their choice. And whereas federal fair housing laws require that all individuals, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, or national origin, be given equal access to all housing-related opportunities, including rental and home ownership opportunities, and be allowed to make free choices regarding housing location. And whereas Connecticut fair housing laws require that all individuals, regardless of race, creed, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, marital status, age, lawful source of income, familial status, learning disability, physical or mental disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression, be given equal access to all housing-related opportunities, including rental and home ownership opportunities, and be allowed to make free choices regarding housing location. And whereas the town of Newington is committed to upholding these laws and realizes that these laws must be supplemented by an affirmative statement publicly endorsing the right of all people to full and equal housing opportunities in the neighborhood of their choice. Now therefore be it resolved that the Newington Town Council hereby endorses a fair housing policy to ensure equal opportunity for all persons to rent, purchase, and obtain financing for adequate housing of their choice on a non-discriminatory basis. And be it further resolved that the town manager of the town of Newington or their designated representative is responsible for responding to and assisting any person who alleges to be victim of any illegal discriminatory housing practices in the town of Newington, and for advising such person of the right to file a complaint with the State of Connecticut Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities, or the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or to seek assistance from the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, legal services, or other fair housing organizations to protect his or her right to equal housing opportunities, adopted by the Newington Town Council this 5th day of April, 2022.
Second.
All right, we have the motion and the second. Is there discussion on this?
Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge previous and I believe current efforts on many people's parts to increase the stock of affordable housing in Newington, consistent with, I believe, statutory requirements or recommendations. I don't know the law exactly, but I believe it's 10% of our housing stock. And I know many efforts have been made, an effort to do that in the past, and we're working at that. I believe we're at 8% plus or minus. At some point, I'd like to know more, not tonight, but I'd like to know more about how that number is arrived at, how we measure that. But I just think that that's an ongoing effort. And I know some towns in Connecticut have not come nearly close to that. And so I think we have something to be proud of in our ongoing efforts to do that and to continue to work towards that goal. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I think several of the projects that are moving forward right now in town, while they're not done yet, do have a certain number of units, and a few of them at least toward that goal. So we can certainly get an updated number of that on that as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, the next item this evening is the high school roof replacement phase 1A. So as we discussed last time, there are, I believe, 3 sections of the high school roof that are in need of some repair, and we're looking to do this project in phases. And I believe this evening we are looking within our motion, I think paragraph 6, thank you, James, does allude to the fact that we need to do a bid waiver if we would like to continue working with a contractor that we have started working with, which is Silktown Roofing. Mr. Chapman, do you want to go ahead and give some more information on this one?
Yes, you explained it very well. We have an opportunity right now for our recent contractor that did the 2 sections of the roof at the high school to come back and do the remainder of the high school. In fact, they'd like to do 3 of the sections over the spring vacation and then the remainder over the summer vacation. Based upon the cost that were the bids that have come in, if we were to seek reimbursement from the state, we would probably, based upon the information provided from the school department, we'd be looking at probably about an $8 million project. However, doing it the way we're suggesting with a bid waiver with Silktown Roofing, we're going to be looking at around $2.5 million. So we're saving the taxpayers, both in the town and the state, significant amounts of money by not going to the difficult process of seeking reimbursement through the state of Connecticut. So this is strongly recommended. We do have leaks in some of the areas already that need to be fixed at the high school, and we want to get moving on this as quickly as possible. And Joe Solomon is here tonight with us. If Joe, you want to add anything?
Sure, Keith. Thank you, Mayor. Not only is it with a contractor that we have done work with in the past and that has stepped in to assist us with the high school roof previously, it's the only contractor that can guarantee us the material procurement for these phases moving forward. Supply chain issues continue in every industry and every field, and it's construction is no exception, if not worse. So having them being able to guarantee us the materials for these areas is huge, and it's something that we need to take advantage of. In my opinion, it's going to save us more money. In addition to what Keith talked about, in just material escalations moving forward, putting this off any further.
Okay, thank you. And I know, Mr. Chapman, the amount of money needed is in the current CIP right now for this project, correct?
There is money in the current CIP, and there's money proposed July 1st to add to the fund. So we will have adequate funding for the project throughout the spring and the summer, yes.
Okay, so phase 1 is coming out of this year's CIP.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any council questions on this one? Councilor Mankey?
Yeah, I would just agree that a bid waiver is appropriate. It's important to get the work done before the leak gets any worse. And if they have the supplies and the materials, I would suggest we go ahead with it to do it. Just one question, Keith, is this money is coming out of the town CIP or the Board of Ed CIP?
Janet, are you on board right now?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm here. What was the question again?
Which CIP is this money coming out of?
This
The
is coming
towns or
out
the
of-
board?
It's coming out of the towns. It's in the town's roof fund that we started last year.
So we're fixing the high school roof out of our funds, out of the town's funds?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko?
I think the three main components that I was worried about was satisfaction with the results and the work of the contractor, the supply chain issues and having the materials guaranteed to be there in order to complete within our desired timeframes, and also that the cost is acceptable within the range of what we were looking for, what we can afford, and will save the taxpayer as well as a state taxpayer money, not going through the school bidding process. So those three components are key, and you've addressed all three of them, so I'm in favor of this.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Page?
Yeah, just thanks, Mayor. In response to Councilor Mankey, in some ways, when you make the statement, our funds versus their funds, it seems like a false dichotomy. My sense is that all the funds are taxpayer funds, and we have a couple of different piles. It doesn't seem to me like a difference. The roof is the town's roof. We need to fix it. So I just wanted to make that point. I think it's the right thing to do, and I agree. I don't know that we need to distinguish necessarily which pile it comes from, but thanks.
Councilor Mankey?
I would agree. It's all of our funds, but they are segregated into different piles for budgetary purposes, as we have this big long book here. And this is just one side of the funds, and then the Board of Ed is their side of the funds. So they are separated by system. So it's important to know people where the money comes from, whether it's the town CIP or the Board of Ed CIP.
Right.
I think that's an important point to know where the money's coming from.
Okay. All right, who would like to go ahead and read this into the record?
I'll read it in.
Thank you, Councilor Rada.
Whereas the town of Newington has been approached by the Board of Education regarding roof repairs to Newington High School, and whereas the Board of Education is interested in repairing at least 3 sections of the high school roof, and whereas the town has solicited a quote from Silktown Roofing of Manchester, Connecticut to complete several roof areas with a 30-year NDL warranty upon final inspection, and whereas Silktown Roofing has acquired the necessary roofing materials to complete the repairs to multiple areas with a 30-year NDL warranty upon final inspection. And whereas Silktown Roofing is working to acquire the necessary roofing materials to complete additional areas with a 30-year NDL warranty upon final inspection. And whereas the town council under the Newington Town Charter, section C 814, hereby determines that it is not in the best interest of the town to require sealed bids due to the health and well-being of the affected employees and students within the school system. And whereas the town council hereby determines that at least the 3 roof areas should be completed immediately and that additional areas should be completed once all necessary roofing materials have been acquired. And whereas the cost of the outlined roof repairs should be funded through the use of the CIP, Town Buildings Roof Replacement and Repairs Account. Now therefore be it resolved that the town council hereby authorizes Keith Chapman, town manager, to execute any and all necessary contracts with Silktown Roofing to complete the repairs to the Newington High School roof as outlined above.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Nagel. Mr. Chapman, did you have something to add?
Yes, I just wanted to remind you as a council that we will be coming back to you in July for the second phase and third phase of this. So you'll be seeking bid waivers as well at that time to have it finalized once the funding is in place.
Okay, thank you. All right, council, is there any other discussion on this? Counselor Donahue?
This also counts as the bid waiver?
Yes, paragraph 6 covers that.
That's what I thought. Right, I wanted to make sure.
You may have seen me texting when we were reading the last item. It's because I was checking with James to make sure that this covered us. Yeah, I saw that in the memo and I wanted to make sure we were covered. Sometimes it's a separate
Right, that's
motion.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
You're thinking waiver of action, not waiver of bid.
Oh, of course I am.
No, that's right.
I thought when we did fire trucks, it was 2 separate, but maybe I'm wrong.
John, you're always thinking.
Action at the same time.
We
Okay,
did both. I think we did both.
all right. So we have the motion, we have a second, no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. The next item this evening is discussion of the creation of a permanent municipal building commission. So we're going to have a discussion and then you'll see the next item on the agenda. We are looking to introduce the ordinance and set a public hearing date for this item. As with any creation of an ordinance, we have to first have a public hearing. So the town council has been deliberating on this for several months now. Actually, prior to the new council taking place, work started on this. We are looking to put into place a permanent municipal building commission to manage all projects within the town. There is draft language that all of the town councilors have had the opportunity to weigh in on. We have had a couple of discussions on this already. We are looking at essentially trying to create a committee that would handle all projects, where right now we have committees set up for each building project separately. We're trying to eliminate the idea of folks from interested parties serving on the committees and perhaps projects being handled in a way that benefits one group or another versus an objective committee that would be made up of professionals that have a little more knowledge of the ins and outs of the trades in order to make sure that we're well represented at the table in moving projects forward. That's my quick synopsis. And with that, I'll open it up for discussion. Councilor Menke.
I can just report, at the last council meeting, we had a subcommittee that met and we met and we got some suggestions from everybody. I would thank Kim for the great editing. She's a great editor. So when I spell something wrong, she fixes it up and that's even better. So we have worked in this a couple of times. I've also worked on this with Councilor Annis back when she was in office. So this is the kind of the final version. I would just make out a couple of points here that this project would exclude any building committee or building committee form that has already gone to referendum. So this would exclude the town hall building committee, which I assume we probably should sunset it because we're here pretty soon. And then the Anna Reynolds building committee, which has already been sent to referendum. But all other building committees would then be disbanded and come under this auspices. I have heard some talk on Facebook that the town manager is going to appoint people. The town manager doesn't appoint anybody to anything. It has to go through the council. The council makes the decision. We're asking the town manager and his staff to make recommendations and sort of collate hopefully there'll be a big groundswell of resumes that people will send resumes in and they'll all want to be on this committee. We hope. But he and his staff would then sort of cull through them and present us a list of resumes, and we'll pick 3 people out of that. But it is always the authority of the town council to appoint people to this commission. It does not fall under the town manager to appoint anybody. Even when he has appointments to the ethics commission, they have to come to the town council.
Right. Very well put.
Okay.
Yeah, Counselor Rada?
Yeah, having been part of this working group, the draft that we have now, I have gone through a second time and actually did a comparison with what we have now in our charter, the ordinance as it stands. And I feel that what we've been working on really is much more detailed, and that is to our benefit and to the residents' benefit, because it really lays things out much more explicitly. That said, I feel that I don't feel comfortable to say that that is a final draft to go before a public hearing yet. I've gone through it again, and I do have a couple of additional questions and further edits that I would like our group to get together again and have one more opportunity to speak and discuss this. One concern I have, and I've raised it in the past and I'll bring it up again, is the number of the initial committee, notwithstanding anything that will take place in relation to the library, because as we know, the trustees own the property. It's a little bit different. And I have a question about that, number one, but my feeling is that a committee of 5 is too few. I would prefer to see a larger committee. I'm willing to propose 7. I know we've talked about even 9. And I think Councillor Page will speak to that as well. And I would like some clarification. I know that it's a percentage when it comes to anything that focuses on the library, but can someone clarify for me the number of voting library members or representatives on a building committee versus the number of committee members themselves? And how is that determined? I know that as it stands now in the draft we have, it's a committee of 5 with 2 representatives from the Board of Trustees, or from the library.
For the Board of Trustees, yeah. I guess
Yeah.
the Board of Trustees
Yeah. Counselor Nagel and I had met with Diane Stam from the library and talked with her about their concerns. Originally, we had gone back and forth with a number of members on this committee, and they felt like they were being underrepresented. So essentially what their concern was, there is a library building committee currently, and they wanted the same percentage representatives on this committee as they had on that. So the percent was calculated based on the membership of the current committee, the library members versus regular sitting members. That percentage was then equated into this equation, and Diane was in agreement with the representation that you have before you.
So it was a negotiation between.
Yeah.
two parties.
So if we, just as an example, if we increase the standing committee to 7 or to 9, what's the proportion of
We'd have to
voting
renegotiate.
representation?
We would have to renegotiate, but we did broach that subject, and if it was 7 members, they would want, I'm trying to remember now, it ended up being an even number if we did the same percentage. It ended up being an even number where we could have tie votes. And so Diane actually said, I don't know why you're doing 7, then why don't you go back to the 5 that you originally started with? And so then we kind of said, you know what, that really does make sense. And we're hearing from other committees and commissions. The Parks and Rec Commission had said they're having trouble getting quorums. We're having other commissions come forward and saying they're having trouble. So based on the fact that we're having such trouble filling positions and the fact that this is such a very specific committee, the idea of 5 was brought forward again as kind of being the where we'd like to see the threshold. And I will say, nothing that we ever do is permanent. It's permanent, and if you needed to change it, you could again by going through the process again and doing another public hearing and changing the ordinance. So if for some reason we saw that 5 was not enough or was an issue, we could always, in a year's time or when we thought appropriate, go through the process again if there was a change that needed to happen. This isn't carved in the tablet on the top of the mountain or anything. We can certainly change it, but the rationale for this was twofold. It was one that I personally believe it will be very difficult to fill even 5 with highly qualified folks from Newington that we want to put on here. And then in addition, with keeping the library in mind, having their voting members will make if it's a library project, those members will be present and will be added. I would remind you that there would only be those 5 voting members, but there will be other members for each project on the committee also. So it wouldn't just be 5 in terms of discussing and offering information. It would be town staff. It would be anyone from the agency that brings forward the project. Correct. Have representation, just non-voting representation.
Right. I guess I'm looking at the flip side, thinking that yes, looking at quorum, that a thought that I have is with only 5 voting members, then that makes it even more critical that there is always a quorum achieved, which is not always necessary. And if there's no quorum, then there's no work that gets done.
But if you moved it to 7, the quorum would be 4.
It would be higher. It would be more people that would have to be present.
So you still have the same, if you can't get 3, you can't get.
I know, and I'm.
And the other problem too,
I'm
I
still
think,
arguing
the other issue here, I think, is
larger number of.
we're asking that people on this committee don't serve in any other, we have those people in town,
Right.
and we're lucky, we have these people in town who volunteer for everything. And they would be on every board and commission if they could. But we're asking for people that aren't on every, because this should be just strictly just the building and not being on another board and commission. So you do have a smaller pool. You have a smaller pool because you're looking for expertise. You can't just get anybody on this commission. And the other issue, if you go to 7, then who appoints the other people? Right now, we're looking for the town manager to give us 3 names.
Well,
And
that
each political party. Now we're gonna get
all of those numbers would have to change.
But what I'm hearing on Facebook is that the town manager is giving 3 people and now it'll be 4 people or 5 people, and that just.
And unfortunately, as you said, Facebook is not always correct and accurate, and it's not Mr. Chapman who will be appointing and approving these folks. It is, and I don't want to say merely because this is work. It will be a recommendation, and it's incumbent upon us as a council or whatever council is standing at the time to either approve or not approve.
Right, exactly. We could say we don't like the 3 people you sent us, and we want 3 more people or 4 more people, or give us 10, we'll pick 3 out of the 10.
I just want to make sure we give other counselors an opportunity too, if you're.
I'm fine for now.
Okay, yeah, for now. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko has her hand up, and then Councilor Nagel as well.
I was going to just expand on the fact that this is not going to be a 5-member committee because they're going to be relying heavily on the sponsoring department. They're going to be relying on other town staff, whether it's in engineering, IT, whatever. It's going to be a working committee of certainly more than 5 people. And then, again, and they'll be empowered to be able to go out and seek expertise or seek input as they need to complete the objective of the building committee. So it's not going to be those 5 individuals working in a vacuum. And also to expand, I think on what Councilor Mankey was saying regarding the appointment. Quite frankly, if I was looking at 5 resumes of people applying for such an important position as this, I don't have the expertise to review or even really interview and ask the right questions. So leaving the search and the interviewing and the review of the resumes and the applicants up to town staff, that we professionals who've been involved in building committees like this and municipal projects, having them make the first cut, I think certainly makes sense, but it's still going to come to the town council to make the final vote. And the town council, I was chatting with Beth earlier that we could even say, give us your top 3, but we want to see all the residents. We can kind of, ad hoc as that, but we want your recommendations, but we might want to see everybody who came, and then we'll have an opportunity to maybe say, well, why didn't you select this one or whatever. And then I just have 2 minor questions, if I don't know whoever. Under composition, number 3, where it says, any vacancy in the commission shall be filled by the relevant appointing authority. Well, the town council is the appointing authority. So if there's a vacancy, I'm not, we would approve.
What if we put relevant appointing source?
Well,
So in other words, if this was someone that the Republican Party put up
right,
and they
or-
resigned, the
right, or
Republican
the
Party
town
would put
manager
another.
before-
Yeah.
And it would be, of course, subject to appointment by the town.
Right,
council,
exactly.
but- Okay.
So can we change that to source
The relevant appointing source with,
with town
with
council?
confirmation by the town council.
Yeah.
And then on.
Well, I'm sorry, I guess I just want to work on that wording if we are thinking about moving to public hearing. So any vacancy in the commission shall be filled by the town council following recommendation from the relevant appointing authority.
Sounds
Does
good to
that
me.
make sense?
Yeah.
All good?
Okay.
And then one other comment under officers' records, it's on the next page, where it says the commission shall elect the chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary from its membership and blah, blah, blah. All the commissions, I think, currently have like a staff liaison, like a permanent staff liaison, like the land use boards have the town planner.
Right.
Environmental quality has the town or highway staff, whatever. Shouldn't there be a staff liaison assigned to this?
I think farther down, and I have to go through it, there is a section that says that this is, that there can be someone who can be assigned, either a clerk or we've given it other names, but,
You can have a clerk of the, we hire a part-time secretary.
Well, I'm
To
not
take
talking
the
about the
notes.
secretary.
No, not the secretary, someone to take the notes and take the records, like the other commissions do, like conservation does.
Yeah, but it's a town staff person.
Correct. Or,
I think the town staff person based on membership would vary depending upon the project that is being considered.
You-
no,
In
no,
No,
membership?
I
Is that
don't
what you-
know, in my opinion, this is a commission, just like TPC has.
right, so
without-
they would hire some,
But they're not hired. We're not
but no,
assigned
they would
to
have,
do
but
it.
they would be assigned to take notes and they would be paid for their services on the commission.
No,
Take-
no, it's not somebody to take notes. It's a staff liaison that, again, the town planner sits on all the land use committees. The highway department sits on environmental quality commission. Bill DeMayo sits on the Parks and Rec Commission. It's a staff person that is there. And this is a permanent building commission. And to me, the facilities management person should be the staff liaison.
Right, and it says in here,
I think it's
I don't know if it
K.
says that.
The town manager or his designee. will be an
K
ex
may
officio
be-
member.
yeah,
where
or
that's
appoint somebody, yeah,
stated.
so they appoint somebody.
So under composition, the next section says ex officio membership. The mayor's ex officio to every commission, but it says here the town manager or their designee shall be ex officio members of the commission. So Mr. Chapman, is it the intent there that either yourself or your designee would be an ex officio non-voting member of this commission and would sit in on those meetings? Yeah.
That's the way I,
Keith, you cut out a little bit. Is that, I'm sorry, can you just say that again?
yeah, the way we would work it is, I would appoint someone from the staff to serve as the representative to carry out the duties as determined by the committee once it's formed as to what they expect from staff members.
Okay.
May I ask the town manager a question about?
Yes, go ahead, Counselor
I'm
Page.
sorry to cut.
Yeah.
Mr. Chapman, are you referring to, and I may have asked this before, but this is new to me. There are a few terms that are floating around in my head based on this conversation. If you look at item K, it says clerk of the works. And then I know there's a term I've heard bantered about, maybe similarly, which is a commissioning agent. And I wasn't sure if that's what Councilor Petracca was referring to, which is an individual who's responsible for making sure, and maybe I'm confusing these two terms, that the work is done and done properly. Is that what you're saying, Council?
I think if I can just, on the town hall commission, for example, on the town hall committee, Jeff Barron was a staff member that oversaw the committee, was at every meeting and made sure that things were brought back to town staff and were handled appropriately. So I think Mr. Chapman would be it would be the town manager or his designee. And if we need to shore up that language, we can certainly add something under ex officio membership. We can say the town manager and or their designee will be.
I guess I would, I don't know, in my opinion, it would be somebody from Joe Salomon or his staff. That would be.
But it might be somebody different depending what the project is.
Well, but it's always like, it would always be like a facility or construction or.
Right, but that would
I
be,
don't think you're not gonna have a different one for each project. That you have a liaison to these 5 people.
Yeah.
Who's always gonna be there for them and working with them and liaising with other town staff should they need it. So this person is not a voting member, but they're always there to be the expert or source for those 5 members.
Mr. Chapman, do you have any staff member in mind for that type of role, or do you want us to just simply put it in as your designee?
I think it should be my designee. I think it depends on what project is being handled by the project building committee. And if, for an example, we need, let's just say it's a large project and it's determined by the committee and the staff that a clerk of the works would be appropriate, then that would be something that we would appoint either in-house or hire a consultant to come in to serve in that capacity, depending on a number of variables that may be going on at the time. So you have somebody like Jeff Barron that would handle all of the, we'll say, information, the minutes and so forth. That's not a clerk of the works. A clerk of the works would be somebody that is assigned to, assure that whatever work is getting done meets all codes and follows all the specifications.
So for the
town.
And again, I'm not looking to go out, I'm looking that these 5 people are not town employees, but they need a town staff person as kind of their point of contact.
right, which would, the town manager would appoint
Right.
to be their contact. When
I
the
know.
town hall
It's
was
just
being
like
built.
how
Well,
But what I'm saying is it shouldn't be for each different project, there shouldn't be a different, I don't know, every commission I've served on in this town has had one steady, solid
Right.
staff person who
Right.
works with those commission members throughout everything. So whether this commission is working on one project or 5 projects during the course of the year, there's one person that works with them, that's a town staff person that works along with them. That's all I'm saying.
so in terms of go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
that would be correct. I mean, first of all, you have to understand that you're probably not going to have 5 projects going on at the same time. Let's just say there's 2 projects. That would be probably more realistic. So there'll be 2 different staff members that will serve each of the committees at that point. In other words, let's just take the Anna Reynolds and the town hall. If they were going on consecutively, then there would be 2 different people appointed by me to serve the committees. One for Anna Reynolds and one for the town hall. If there's only one project going on, then it would only be one person from staff that would serve in that capacity.
Let's just leave it.
Okay. Counselor Nagel?
The conversation has changed quite a bit from when I had wanted to make my comments, and some people have already made them before I was able to. So I'll rephrase it differently and simply. I'm in favor of keeping it as 5 people on the committee. The percentage for the library in that special case could go up more, and then you wind up with an even number of people on the group, which provides a problem in terms of voting. Usually committees are better when it's an odd number as opposed to an even number. So there aren't ties if that would happen. And so I would think, and whether, no matter how many it is or few it is, you're always going to have quorum problems, but I think it's even a higher percentage the more the number of members that are required to be there. There are a number of committees that are not, and that are working right now within town that just cannot get a quorum because the numbers are above 5. I could name them, but that's irrelevant at the moment. If anybody wants to know, I can tell you individually about that, or anyone in the public wants to know. It's not the committee's fault. It's just the numbers that are needed to make a quorum. So basically it's 5, and if the numbers are changed, it creates a whole other problem in terms of giving the library the percentage that is happy with it has had. It's felt when we've in the past on town building committees. So that's it. I forgot the rest if I'd had anything else to say.
All right. Don't worry. If you raise your hand again, you'll get another chance.
All right, I'll keep punching away.
Counselor Donahue.
I completely forgot, so.
Counselor Page, your hand is still up.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Counselor Mankey and Counselor Rada and Donahue for meeting. It was the same night that I was headed up to Boston to see the Bruins unfortunately lose to the Maple Leafs. But we had a good time anyway, my 4 sons and I. So thanks for the work that you all put into this. I know I had given you my notes. My first question, and I have several, is if Mr. Chapman could just briefly again explain the Owens report and what are, say, the top 3 priorities based on the Owens report for us to work on in the near future.
I'm not prepared to respond to that. I don't think that's the topic of this agenda item, is it?
Is there, yeah, I'm not sure
I
how
thought
that correlates.
maybe I misunderstand the Owens report. I thought the Owens report was a many-page document that listed the priorities.
It's volumes and volumes, and there is a list of priorities, but some have been attacked already, some haven't been, so.
And that
That
wouldn't
might be a
have anything to do with
discuss-
this committee.
Yeah, I mean, the Owens report, we could add as an agenda
That doesn't have
item.
to do with CIP projects.
It,
Projects could come forward from the Owens report in CIP, or they could go through referendum, depending on the size and scope. And that would be something that, even though the Owens report gave us kind of a list of projects that are necessary and attached some kind of weighted scores to them, so to speak, we now, as a council and as a town, have to take that information and weight it in our own way based on what we know to be true about those facilities and town needs. So I think it would be remiss of us to just pick the top 3 out of that report and say those are our 3, because they wouldn't necessarily correlate with exactly what that report says.
I just didn't know because I haven't been here. I wasn't here when this was done. So I genuinely just wasn't sure, based on the Owens report and the work that's been done to date, if
Mhm.
this body, those of you who have been here before me, and Mr. Chapman who's been here for a while, could just say off the top of their head, because they've been doing this a while, oh yeah, clearly they've recommended these top 3 or 4 or 5 projects and we agree or disagree. And the reason I ask is because one of the concerns Councilor Mankey has raised is that, and you may have mentioned tonight, Mayor, is that one of the proposed solutions in this proposal is to do away with some of the competing interests in town.
Mhm.
That there are competing interests, and that has apparently caused problems in the past and may cause them in the future, given all the work that has to be done. And I just wasn't sure to what extent the Owens report, as explained to the voters, to the residents, if that could resolve some of that contention, because clearly it's, how many pages is the Owens report?
Oh, it's
volumes.
volumes. It's volumes.
And
It's
how
shelf.
much did that cost the town?
If I remember, it was around 50,000. Was it 100?
Yeah,
So
something like
we
that.
spent 100,000, and I'm not editorializing on whether that's good or bad, because I'm ignorant about that. So just factually, 100K on hundreds and hundreds of pages, I would just think that that would be a really important document for us to refer to, combined with our inherent knowledge and empirical knowledge of the needs of the town going forward, to help us reduce any potential conflict of interest or competing interests.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think that's a separate agenda item from this discussion. So
Well-
this discussion really is the
Has nothing to
formation
do
of
with
the commission.
The only reason I would contend it does is because that would be a mitigating circumstance against forming this commission. If in fact we've spent $100,000 on hundreds and hundreds of pages of a consultant report to help us determine priorities, then Councilor Mankey or other people's points about this proposal resolving any contention between competing parties should be put to rest.
No, I think you're misunderstanding the competing parties part. The competing parties is that each project would have to have a committee formed for it based on our town charter and statute. So based on our town charter, so right now the library has its own building committee. Anna Reynolds has its own. Mill Pond has its own. People that are appointed to those from the political parties typically have an interest in that project. So instead of having separate committees for each project, and the projects will still come forward based on need and priority. But having said that, the Owens report was done, I mean, it's already a year and a half has passed since we got that information. So some of those projects have already been tackled through other processes, through CIP, and some of them are still ongoing. So there were some needs at the American Legion building that were addressed. There's the Anna Reynolds project that's already being addressed. So some of it's already been addressed, but as projects come forward and a building committee is needed, if it's a building committee type project based on the requirement, then we would be having folks that are permanently on this commission that don't have a vested interest in whatever project comes forward. If the project that comes forward is the library, or if the project that comes forward is another school, or a Parks and Rec project. So for example, and I use this as an example, not in any disrespectful way, but the town hall committee had several members on it that had a vested interest, in my opinion, in Parks and Recreation. And we trusted and I believe that they did their very best to represent the entire project. But it's hard to do when you have a vested interest in one or the other. So if you're on a Parks and Rec commission and you're serving on a town committee where a large portion of that project is related to Parks and Rec, then it's hard to differentiate that. And we want to make sure that while people do their very best to serve the entire project, we're making sure that there isn't a vested interest in any one parcel, or project.
Okay.
Does that help? And we can certainly add the Owens report for review as another agenda item in the future. Just jot it on your agenda list.
No, I appreciate that, man. With all due respect, I do really think that it is relevant, because it's the raison d'etre in some ways of why we're talking about doing this, but we can agree to disagree respectfully.
Deal.
Thanks.
Let me see who's next. I'm sorry, guys. Counselor Donahue?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this committee will use the Owens report to get things in line. So, I mean, what's on the Owens, and just because it's a report that says this building needs to be this, I mean, if it's like, number one, we got to fix something, or a school, but we're going to have that discussion and move around what we think the priority is. Right. So the Owens report will be consulted by this committee or commission, excuse me, and then, we'll go forward.
It's a data point. I agree.
It's thousands of data points. So the Owens report is important, but not for the formulation of this committee.
Thank you, Counselor Donahue. Counselor Nagel?
And to add what was said, which is part of what I was going to bring up, thank you for mentioning that, Counselor Donahue, that indeed the committee is involved with the working of whatever is being renovated or built or whatever at that time being, where the report was done at a certain time period. So something may have deteriorated more in the course of time when it actually comes to being a suggestion. So things are in flux given the amount of time that is passed with something. It's, to be simplistic, it's something like how we handle roads, that we have a plan in terms of roads and when they're going to be done based upon the deterioration of what they see at the moment they make the plans. But if we have a hard winter and something horrendous happens to some other road, it gets bumped up or it gets put in the list for a priority. So it's a simplistic way of looking at it. And the town manager in his office has the Owens report, and it's like 8 or 9 large volumes, so it's voluminous. And indeed, it gives detail about every single building that the town owns, Board of Ed, as well as town, in terms of its weaknesses, its strengths, its whatever, at the given time that a report was done. So it's a great reference source. It wasn't meant to be, this is it, and this is the way it's going to be, and it doesn't matter what your function is in a building, that a committee, that's it, and this is the order in which we do it. It's a suggestion at a given period of time of what is deteriorating, and with everything else, this council and they make the choices as to how it's done.
Thank you, Counselor Nagel. Deputy Mayor Badrego?
Yeah, Counselor Page, my recollection of why I voted for the Owens report, whatever, is every department was coming to us every budget season and saying the roof is falling. I mean, the sky is falling.
sky's falling.
Department A comes, the sky is
Or the
falling.
roof.
Then the next speaker comes up, oh, no, my building is falling apart. Then the third department comes, no, we need this money because for us sitting here saying, okay, whose sky is really falling? We didn't have that knowledge because everybody was claiming. And so the idea was the Owens report was not to set priorities. The Owens report was to get an outside person who had no, or company, no vested interest in any of the buildings in town to come and take an objective look and say, and give us what is the real condition of these buildings. So it wasn't to set priorities. It was basically to give us the real story. And then from that, then we can make a better judgment on where we could spend our limited resources and how to do it.
It's a great way to put it.
Mayor?
You can, I know Mr. Chapman has something to add
No,
too.
please, go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chapman?
Yeah, I just want to say that this committee that's being formed is not going to replace the role of the facilities director. The facilities director was hired with 20 years of experience and serves as a professional. He's going to be working with the Owens report and prioritizing the work that has to get done. This committee gets involved once the facilities director meets with the town council and the funding that's necessary to do, we'll say, the roof at the high school is in place. That's when the committee will get involved. Their role is not to identify and set the standards and the process and the priorities. That's the role of the facilities manager or director. So I just want to make sure that we're not having this committee take on a charge that I don't believe was ever intended. That is the role of administration working with the town council. Then the committee gets involved once the council says, okay, let's do the roof at the high school. That's where I see the committee coming in, not setting priorities.
Yeah, correct. You're right. Thank you. Counselor Page?
Thanks, Mayor. My question is either to Mr. Chapman or to anyone who knows where we can have, where I can obtain a copy of a very abbreviated summary of those priorities. I don't want thousands of pages. Is there one that weighs less than 25 pounds that I can carry home? I don't mean right now.
I got a 20-pound one for you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
There is an executive report summary that Owens provided. And let me just clarify that the Owens report, I believe, is somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 pages. It deals with every building the town owns. And each building was inspected and determined what was needed at that time when the Owens folks looked at it. Now, for an example, the Kellogg Eddy roof was identified as being in dire need of replacing. That's being done. The American Legion roof, I believe, has been done. The high school roof was identified. That's going to be done. So we've already started to work off of the Owens report, and our facilities director continues to analyze and inspect what the Owens report has made conclusions of to make sure that it's accurate. For an example, the Owens report included a study of the Indian Hill Country Club. Now, the Owens report indicated that there was a need for some work to be done on the exterior of the building. However, at the chamber meeting last week, the state of the town, it was reported back to me that 2 individuals tripped on the stairs going up to the club from the parking lot down below. Now, that was not specifically outlined in the Owens report as being a priority, we'll say, but in fact, the facilities director has gone over and inspected those stairs and found that, yes, they are in dire need of being replaced and repaired. So we're not going to depend on the Owens report as the guide. We'll have the Owens report as a guide, but it's not intended and never was intended to be the Bible to work from. It's an assistant to the work of the facilities manager or director. I
Okay,
hope that clarifies it a little bit more.
yeah,
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And I agree with you, Mr. Chapman and Ms. Counselor Donahue about that point, and others who have spoken, Nagel and so forth. Thank you.
thank you. Counselor Mankey?
Yeah, just to clarify, I think we're getting off the subject. Owen's report and this committee are two separate things. They're both, Owen's report would be a guideline for this committee, maybe for the short term, for the long term, but it's two separate issues, I think. And
Well,
I also want to make clear that the money spent on Owen's report has been used. It's changed how we do our CIP. We've already taken some of those projects as town manager reported. We've already taken some of those projects off the Owen's report and started working on them because we had that report. So it's not like it's money we wasted. We've been using that report since we got it, or actually before we got it, because we're getting inklings as it was coming down.
Right. No, I appreciate it.
I will say too, though, I wouldn't necessarily call the report a guideline for this committee. This committee is going to take its charge from the town council. So the only they may get information from town staff based on that report if there's a certain project that they're deliberating on, because we have forwarded it to them. So the only projects that go to this committee, as mentioned in the draft language, are ones that have already been vetted through this council and determined as the next priority. So based on town staff input from that report, from their own experience, and based on what this council then deliberates on, projects would move forward to this commission through this body as a vehicle. So that report is going to help drive our informed decisions and the decisions that come forward from town staff and their recommendations to us. And then certainly if it was deemed relevant, then town staff would share information from the report with the committee based on whatever project is before them. But just to reiterate it, this is not going to be a guiding document for that commission. It's going to be a guiding document for this council and for town staff to move projects into this committee. Let's see who's next. Sorry, guys. Okay, Counselor Page.
Just a question about the section that has to do with appointments, membership. What's the rationale for having political parties each having one appointment?
Quite frankly, it was just every committee right now, or not every perhaps, but almost all of our committees right now are comprised, I think it is everyone, is comprised by members that are brought forward from both parties, so that both parties feel that they have representation. Typically right now, all of the membership on most committees is brought forward by those parties. Right. So when looking at this, we decided to at least give each party one member of representation, and then make the rest the professional. We're looking for the same qualifications from those members
on both sides,
from those members as well.
Well, it says similar, not the same. And I appreciate you taking out the language preferably. So I'd like to have it be the same, not similar, in composition item 1.
Well, it's hard to say what is similar. I mean, is an architect similar to a landscape architect or similar to an electrician?
Okay.
So that's why we're trying to keep it. If you make it too specific, then you want one of these, 2 of these, and 4 of those.
No, I appreciate that. It's just that if our goal is to make this less political, as the mayor just said, then why not just not have, and your party, my party, everybody can talk, but why not have no party recommendations or appointments? Let's have the town manager. I would be in favor of having the town manager interview 24 experts in our town, engineers and construction folks and all the people we're talking about. And through his knowledge, he's been doing this a long time, and the interview process and the resumes, make those recommendations to us. And my party and your party doesn't have a say in that. It would make it a purer, I think, more honest process. And honest, I don't mean a cleaner process.
Counselor Nagel?
I think it's the role of the liaisons from both parties to bring information to the town council. And if you have both, there may be nothing to disagree on, but if both sides see different points of view from it, at least the council will get the image of what's happened from 2 parties, from people from both sides of the aisle, so to speak. So there is a viable, objective accounting as to what has gone on in those, in that committee. So it's viable for that. Going the route that you've mentioned entirely, it may be a good one, but I do think the public would think that they've been kind of left out in one way or another in terms of the process, if you know what I'm getting at.
Well, yeah, and if I may respond to that?
Yes.
If I may, speaking of the public being left out, and I know Councilor Mankey and others have spoken about tonight and other nights, the challenges with having stakeholders or user interests, as it's been referred to in some of the ordinances I've read from other towns, have a voting member on the commission, as if that's a bad thing. And I know the mayor referenced the Park and Rec involvement in determining the scope and the details of the town hall, which I'm not aware of any of those details, but in terms of, to your point, Councilor Nagel, having the voters' stake represented, I think stakeholder membership, not ex officio, but membership on the committee should be a discussion point, because whether they are a superintendent who's appointed or there's some other member that's elected, I think that they should be fighting for the interests of that project, fighting hard, and then ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong, under the current design of the way we do things, doesn't the buck still stop with us? So if we feel that Park and Rec or schools or any other body is the scope of the project is too great, then we get to comment on that and we get to legislate as such, don't we? For example, pools. Wasn't the pools proposal considered by a previous council to be too large in scope? And there was pushback by this body, was there not?
Yes, the project, we have input basically at the kind of at the end when it's ready to go out to referendum.
Okay.
So if all of that work's been done for months and months, I mean, certainly we could weigh in if we go to the committee, but many of it, obviously we can't go to every committee meeting. It would be quite cumbersome. But if there's a project going forward and we're at those committees, we would be able to speak as essentially a member of the public, basically, or if it was a liaison on a certain committee. But otherwise, the committee would do the hard work over sometimes months and months and bring forward a project. And at that point, there's an awful lot vested in moving that project either forward or not. And oftentimes projects do move forward, and it may not necessarily be what we all had envisioned it being, but because there's already 6 or 8 months into it, how do you then say, never mind all of that work? So you can push back, and there is a process for that.
Right.
But yeah, it is quite a cumbersome process.
Right. So there's no, under the current process, there isn't a way to communicate to that committee what the council's wishes are or what the town's budget factually is relative to their desires for a new pool or a new school or a new.
Right now, when the committees are formed, you can, as a council, give them a charge, which we did with the town hall committee. We gave them a budget. This was our drop dead, with Anna Reynolds. We, when we did go out to referendum, we set a cap to that, but that was already after the process had begun and we went out to referendum. So yes, there are mechanisms to do that.
I just think that stakeholders is not a dirty word, and having stakeholders who are citizens of our town have a seat at the table, have a vote, is not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, democracy is messy, and I think, but it's an important messy, and it yields results sometimes we disagree with, and I think it's a concern that we would want to remove stakeholder votes from the table. And in looking at ordinances from a dozen towns, and I thank you, James, for your sending me information yesterday on other towns that have been considered by the previous council. I see that voter representation, it's the term is used, and I shared this with all of you, I think, user interest votes. On every ordinance that I looked at, from Berlin to Suffield, alphabetically, there's 12 of them on this document. Every ordinance lists that the user interests have a vote. There are, in some cases, ex officio members, like superintendents, town mayors, and town managers. But in those cases where they go out of their way to state ex officio representation on the commission, they still go out of their way to explicitly say, that users have a vote on the commission, or the language is not exclusionary to that. So I think, I'm not sure why Newington, as I read it, I may stand corrected if James or if the town manager has more intimate knowledge of these ordinances. But as I read through them, there was nothing that forbid, especially because all these commissions as listed in the ordinances by these 12 towns are much larger than what's being proposed here. We've got Berlin right now has 7 members. Canton has 11. East Windsor has 9. Ellington 12. Groton 7. Killingly 7. New Fairfield 8. North Branford 9. Seymour 9. Simsbury 9. South Windsor 8. Suffield 8. Now you might say, as to Councilor Nagel's point, why are there even numbers? That doesn't make sense when they vote. Some of those do represent alternates. So there are commissions, but there are also alternates added to that number, which would also raise not only the size that we're proposing, but also, to me, why not alternates in the event, God forbid, somebody is sick or worse? How do we fill that spot without having those alternates? So I think that with a larger number, we could allow for not just residents, who many people have made the valid point that it's hard to get people on commissions. I get it. People are busy. But it would allow for stakeholders to have a seat at the table, not just as ex officio.
Okay, I'll just respond to the residents piece. I mean, we are expecting that the members be residents and have qualifications. So we're not excluding residents altogether. We are expecting that membership be made up of residents. Let's see, Councilor Donahue.
I just want to say that, I mean, I hate the term that always comes up, voter suppression, okay? We're not suppressing anybody's votes. The citizens of Newington have the ultimate say, okay? When this goes to referendum, they say yes or they say no. Anna Reynolds went through with flying colors, but there were a group of people that said, no, it's too much money. Okay, so the citizens are not excluded. They have the ultimate say during referendum. So, and there's always public hearings. I mean, I don't know if you've been to some of the Anna Reynolds meetings. In the beginning, they were quite spirited, right? And so I don't think anybody from the town is being shut out. And like I said, in the end, the citizens have the ultimate say.
And just to piggyback on that, there's public participation at every meeting. So even though there are certain voting members, public has the opportunity to weigh in at every meeting. Councilor Menke?
Just a couple points. One, I think when we talk about the charge of a commission or a project, it's hard for the council to know, for Anna Reynolds, for instance, what the budget should be, because we don't know we don't have it. We aren't architects, and that's the problem. That's part of the problem. I look at a building and say, I could do that. I could paint it for this much or that. So we don't know that. And so it's hard for the council to give the charge. And then once this project gets going, it's hard for the council to say, oh, wait a minute, now you're spending 35 million, but now we only want to spend 20 million. Well, then how do you change that around? So it's hard for council to do that. And that's where depending on these people. I mean, I think both parties are responsible enough to put people on this commission who would be qualified. I think they would both, frankly, look stupid if they put someone on who wasn't qualified. So I think this just gives them a sense, or sort of a stake in the process a little bit, and I kind of like that. The other issue, that when Councilor Page talked about the user interest, I can't imagine that these 5 people would sit around the table and build a school and not get the superintendent's input, or build a library and not get the library's input, or build a firehouse and not get a fireman's input. These people they're not going to serve on this committee to squash hopes and dreams of the commission, the people that are asking for the project. They're going to do like we do for the best of the town and for the best of the whole town. So while this one project may be important to one group and critical, it has to happen, it may not be a project that the whole town thinks it's critical. And that's why it's important, I think, to keep this kind of a commission kind of pure, or kind of without other influences. Other people can speak, and certainly I'm sure that if we were building a pool at Churchill Park, Bill DeMayo would have his people here talk about how to build a pool, and he would have people here who speak.
Yes, he did.
Speak about why the poll is important. So that word will get across to this commission. But I like the way it's set up now. I would prefer, I still prefer the 5. I think it's cleaner, it's easier to get. If we do find a problem down the road that we aren't getting members, we can't get, then we may have, but even if we can't get 5 members, we can't get 7, 8, or 9, 10 members. So, and the more members you get, the more that quorum goes up. So that's a problem, I think.
All right. Counselor Page?
A couple points. One is, I don't know if James or a member here can clarify the establishment of a quorum. How is that determined? Is that Robert's rules? Is that some magical other statute?
Oh, he's standing up.
No, he's got to go to the mic so we can hear him.
And I won't be Keith today. Okay, so quorum membership is determined by Robert's rules specifically. 51% determines your quorum. Minority representation, that is a different issue. That says how many maximum members of one party can be part of a board. So you have a 7-member board. Minority representation says you can have 5 members from one party, 2 members from a minor party. If you have a 7-member board and it's simply, what do you need to have your meeting? That's 4 members. For a 5-member board, that's going to be 3 members because that's 51% or close as it's slightly over. So that's where your quorum versus your minority representation comes in. And a lot of people get that confused because it's called minority, but it's really about the maximum you can have. So the statute really doesn't make much sense, but neither does the state sometimes. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, may I continue there? I had a couple other points. One is, so that leaves me still questioning why, if you look at the population of each of these towns, the one that's closest to us is I believe South Windsor. This is in the document. Most of them are in the tens of thousands, and many of them, the majority, I believe, have a selectman form of government. So my sense, and it's just speculation on my part, I could be wrong, is that a building committee is appropriate for those towns that are smaller and need that expertise to be focused. I'm not sure, as we're literally the largest town proposing this relative to the other towns that I could find and what James himself found who have these, who, by the way, with a smaller population have larger numbers and alternates than we're proposing with this. They also have, other than Groton, which has a 3-year term and a 7-member commission, have longer years of term. Now, some of them are staggered. The one I mentioned, North Branford, with 5 years, that also has staggered 4- and 3-year terms to overlap, obviously, if a project goes beyond the scope. So my point is, I think 3-year term, 2-year and 1-year proposed in our proposal is falling short of what apparently is these other towns have felt, other than Groton, is necessary. But I would add that the Groton Building Commission, along with the Seymour Building Commission, are actually schools permanent building commissions. They're actually specific to schools. The schools have their own to support the expertise there. So that's just my other criticism of this, that I think we need to look at the tenure of the membership.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Counselor Nagel?
I would we seem to be going in circles and extraneous, relevant or not relevant pieces of information that may be important or not. Would put forth that I'd be willing to read the proposed ordinance amendment introduction and resolution as an introduction to what has been suggested and amended at tonight's meeting, if indeed this is the appropriate time.
Okay, so we have.
We're on discussion first, right?
Yeah, we are currently in discussion, and the next item is the creation of an introduction of the ordinance. So, I mean, I would think that we could wrap up discussion soon, but right now we have one modification to the language under composition. I believe everybody in consensus agrees to that. I'm looking around the table and I'm seeing head shaking to change under composition number 3 to any vacancy in the commission shall be filled by the town council following recommendations from the relevant appointing authority. I believe that was what we had amended it to.
I think so.
If there are any other suggested changes in language at this point, we can decide by consensus if we're changing the document before we move to the next item, which is the introduction of the ordinance. The next hand up is Deputy Mayor Bedrejko. No, we're still discussing if there's any language that you'd like to see changed. I would.
Well, I just want to respond a little bit to Councilor Page. Regarding the political appointments, I'm really on the fence with you on this one because I agree in a way, but yet I do agree with what Councilor Nagel said in the terms that that's kind of I think it would, the political appointees will, I assume, still have to come, just like every other commission appointment, will have to come before the town
Correct.
council. So we will have the authority, if somebody comes across that really isn't qualified, we will have the authority to say, no, this commission is way too important. So we, so hopefully, you know, and again, since it's one-on-one, and hopefully each political party will realize that this is an important, one of the most important commissions that are that's going to be serving the town. That due diligence will be done. But secondly, I just want to say regarding the stakeholder vote, I recall the discussions, and one of the reasons was, and I know, you know, the town manager said we're not going to have multiple building projects going on, and well, hopefully we're not going to have a slew of projects going on, but these 5 members are going to be tasked basically with having a very broad and comprehensive overview of everything that's going on in town. So certainly when the stakeholder comes and serves, they're going to be sitting on that board. They're going to be used as the stakeholder source of expertise. They're going to be contributing to discussions. They're going to be asked questions. They're going to be running back to their board, whatever. But again, as a stakeholder, they're going to be focused on their needs, just like, you know, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. But these 5 people are going to have to be voting in terms of what they also know is going on in other parts of the town, in terms of resources, in terms of contracts, in terms of staffing, in terms of other building projects on it. So that was the rationale, is that these 5 people are still, even though it's you know, one building committee for a certain project, they've got to take this broad overview of everything that's going on in town, whereas the ex officio members for that particular committee are going to be just kind of focused on their little particular stakeholder. So we're hoping that these 5 members, it's going to be a tough job for them. I'm not sure whether I would be up to the challenge, but I also think that we have to, this is not set in stone, really. I mean, I think we just have to kind of take a leap and see where it's going to go.
Counselor Donahue?
No, I'm putting my hand down. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Page.
That's actually for Counselor Rada.
It's,
Counselor Rada.
I didn't want to, you know, do one of these.
Just throw something at her.
2 things. One, if we're looking at some additional or edited language under composition, number 1, I'm suggesting, and hopefully this might make it sound a little more appropriate. Where we've got, it's the first sentence, which goes on forever. 2 of which, 1 shall be appointed, recommended by each major party, subject to the approval of the town council with, and I'm suggesting adding, considered qualifications as shown above. So it really is referring back to those.
So instead of similar?
Instead of similar, yeah.
So
Considered
changing similar to-
qualifications as shown above.
Considered above.
And, you know, it's obvious that we can't list everything. It's, you know, kind of including but not limited to.
Right.
I think that's goes without saying in here. My second question relates to public hearing and additional edits or comments. I didn't bring the document with me tonight because I didn't want to take time going item by item, line by line, but I do have some. That's why I suggested that, or want to know if we can. I prefer that this not be the final document, final draft that would go out for public hearing before maybe the four of us on this subcommittee get together again and go through, not ad nauseum or ad infinitum, some additional points.
I guess right now we have on our agenda this evening, the introduction and to set the public hearing date. And my understanding is the language that we send forward tonight would be the one to be considered.
That would be your consideration. That doesn't mean that after the public hearing has been held, that you cannot make additional changes to it or recommendations based on public comment or discussion at the table.
Okay.
I'm for the most part, when I did go back and review, because we had a long conversation and a very fruitful conversation. I think we, when the three of us met with James, four of us, that I think we went a long way to kind of refining some of the language and clarifying some of the language. That's more of what my intent is. I'm not, striking wholesale sections of this. It's more, in my view, and might not be in the view of anyone else, to further maybe define and clarify and substantiate some of what's already in here.
Counselor Mankey, your hands up.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on this for a while. We're probably never getting any document that is exactly perfect in all of our minds, because it's impossible.
Right.
We're at the founding fathers
agree.
doing the Declaration of Independence. We're just doing the best we can here. So I would be in favor of forwarding this to public hearing. After comments from the public, we always have the chance to change it. I mean, we can change it, but we need to move this forward. If the longer we wait, the more people sign in about and not having any really knowledge about this, other than just their opinion, which is valid, but we need to move forward with this. I don't want to keep delaying this process.
Well, and that said, I agree that there may be something may come up during public hearing that we may thought of and say,
And we can always then make that change, but we need the public hearing. That's why you have a public hearing. Yeah. And if we don't have if we don't send this forward tonight, then the committee could meet again, but then we wouldn't be able to send it forward to the next meeting, and then we would be into May, and then the end of May, and then this would just be going on.
So I'm going to look around the table and I want to get a consensus. Well, you know what? We don't have to do that. It's on our agenda. We have to move to that item anyway. So never mind what I just said.
Thankfully, Susan did pick up a piece in here. There's actually a duplicated sentence, which we all missed.
Okay.
Kim.
I know. On the one I have at home, I have it.
Okay.
Do you have that one crossed off?
I do have it crossed out. Yes.
Okay.
I saw it and said, what were we thinking?
Yes.
Yes.
So on
It
the
was
first-
redundant.
Good work.
Items, what it would have been, I believe, item 7 is now item 6.
Right.
Yeah.
It's repeated upon twice. So if we could strike that last
Of the
line.
project, yeah.
Correct.
And some of it was just, and we talked about this at the last meeting, consistency of language.
Right. And I think I did notice there is another statement of a non-voting bracket that we need to add in there as
Yeah.
well.
And his/her could be added.
One or
another
two times.
spot, yeah.
So if there are places that we need to make changes, and we make those tonight, that's fine. Otherwise, you can bring, if there are minor edits, then bring them forward next time for consideration after the public hearing. Okay. Councilor Mankey, did you have something else?
Yes, I would move, we send this is what we got now, with the changes that we've made tonight, and the striking out of the sentences, and then adding brackets to where the brackets go. I would recommend we move this to public hearing for the meeting on the 26th, I believe.
I'm just looking for consensus on the most recent change that we suggested, which, I mean, the striking of the duplicate sentence is what it is. But on the composition, number 1, that Councilor Rada said to change similar to considered qualifications, are we all good with that?
Good.
You're shaking your heads, good. So we're gonna change that language. So we have, I think, 3, we have that one, we have the
The vacancies.
composition number 3 change that we talked about, and then we have the duplicate sentence. I believe those are the changes we talked about this evening. Did I miss anything?
Sue pointed this out to me, number 5 under, there's like 6 number 5s.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Comes after 4.
Ex officio membership. The number 5, I know it reads kind of clunky to me, like we should maybe just leave the not, ex officio member, leave the member in there instead of striking that.
So the requesting department organization shall have the ability to recommend advisory ex officio non-voting member. So subcommittee, why did you take member out there?
I can't remember.
No, and I looked at, when I was looking at it, it was clunky. I think I tried to rework
I
it a
think so. I
little
think
bit.
if we unstrike member, it makes more sense.
Okay.
Put member back in, and then who will be approved and appointed by?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I think
Will
that's,
be approved and
You know,
appointed by the town council.
No, well, if you go on, it'll say shall serve until the completion of the project, so that may be awkward.
and shall serve.
Okay. All right, folks, so look it over again just to see if there's any other typos before our next meeting. We can always make minor. I would prefer to stick to minor changes unless changes are based on public participation at the hearing, just because I think this is our document that we're moving forward substantially. I'd like to keep the content as close to this as possible after we have the public hearing, and then based on public input, we could certainly make some changes or tweak some language if there are some issues that we noticed, like we just did there. Okay.
We actually go through the document quickly, just confirm on the screen that that is the language you're going to want.
So do we?
The requesting department organization shall have the ability to recommend advisory ex officio non-voting members who will be approved and appointed by the town council and who shall serve. Right? We need an and there as well. Who shall serve until the completion of the project. Shake of heads around the table if that's what we agree on?
Yep.
Okay. All right. We have consensus on that.
Do we need to accept all the subcommittee recommendations as a whole?
Was everybody okay with all of the other strikeouts and changes?
Yeah, I would move, we just accept all the subcommittee's recommendations, all the reds out.
Today.
Today, right, today.
Yeah.
As well as the changes.
As well as change we made tonight.
Yeah, which would be today.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to accept the changes made by the committee as well as the changes we just made this evening. Is there a second?
Second.
Nope, we're all second.
Second by Councilor Nagel. I hope there's no further discussion, but is there? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of accepting the language, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 8-0. Councilor Camillo appears to be out of the meeting. Yep. Okay. He left one, I'm sorry. Okay, so Councilor Camillo left the meeting at 8:02, so we're 8-0. All right, so now we are on to the next item, which is the official introduction of the ordinance and to set the public hearing date. And I lost my spot in my packet, so give me a second. So because we are looking to change the ordinance, as we all know, we have to set a public hearing date and introduce the ordinance. Councilor Menke, would you like to do that?
I would be more than happy to.
Thank you.
Introduction. I hereby introduce for the town council's consideration the proposed ordinance amendment to chapter 8, boards, committees, commissions, and bureaus. Article, let's see, that's 7, Permanent Municipal Building Commission, a copy of which has been filed with the clerk of the council. 12? Oh, yeah, it's an X. Oh, you're right, 12, I'm sorry. Resolved that the Newington Town Council hereby schedules a public hearing on April 26, 2022 at 6:10 p.m. to consider the proposed ordinance amendment, Chapter 8, Boards, Committees, Commissions, and Bureaus, Article 12, Permanent Municipal Building Commission, a copy of which is attached to this resolution.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Nagel. Any discussion on this? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
All right, Councilor Page opposed, so we are standing at 7-1. Motion passes 7-1 with Councilor Camillo absent. Sorry, I just need to make a note. Thank you. All right, next item is refunds, approval of the April 5th. Deputy Mayor Bedrejko?
Resolved that property tax refunds in the amount of, wow, $96,479.21 are hereby approved in the individual amounts and for those named on the requests for refund of an overpayment of taxes certified by the revenue collector, a list of which is attached to this resolution.
Second. Seconded by Council Rata. I just want to know if you're including wow in the action.
Wow, in the motion.
All right. You'll see attached, as always, the listing, and there are two larger items that were brought forward from the tax collector. All right, so we have the motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
No, seconded. Seconded by Council Rata. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 8-0. Council Camillo absent. All right, we are moving on now to new business. We were given a revised copy.
Just revised?
Yeah, on your table this evening. So let me just give you a little brief overview, and I have talked to everyone here this evening, just to give you a brief understanding of how this came about. So in reviewing our budget that was presented to us by the town manager is now our tentative town council budget. The Board of Education was recommended at a $1.3 million increase, which does not rise to the level that they have indicated they need in order to maintain staffing levels and continue providing the services that they are currently. The Board of Education chairman had approached me after receiving the memo indicating that the health benefits account was looking like it would have a surplus of $476,000. Now, for those of us that understand the history of this, the health benefits money for the Board of Education, if there is a credit given, the final, we get an early number now, and then we get a final number in September so it's after this fiscal year. That number is often different than what it presents as now and what is projected at come September based on claims and changes from now until September. So in talking with Chairman Fletcher from the Board of Education, I had asked him, the superintendent at her budget presentations has said that they are on a spending freeze. And so my question that I posed back to Chairman Fletcher was, could he ask if the $476,000 that they're anticipating that was in that memo that he had come to me with could be, instead of coming from health benefits, could be turned over to the town by June 30th in the form of a surplus. Based on our the statute and town charter, we, at the end of the fiscal year, when we reconcile our books, if there is a surplus on the Board of Education's budget, that money always has to come back. It's required to come back to the town general fund. And so in years past, last year, the Board of Education did return $500,000 to the general fund before June 30th. And then the year before that, they returned $1.5 million. So I thought it was reasonable to ask if those funds might be available through surplus instead of through health benefits. The chairman of the Board of Education consulted with Dr. Brummett, the superintendent of schools, and very quickly replied that they would be willing to agree to return that amount of money through surplus instead of through health benefits at the end of this fiscal year. And what that essentially does in a favorable way is it would count as revenue in the town line item and therefore offset what the Board of Education is asking for an additional increase. So above what the town manager put forward to us, which was $1.3 million, they are asking that we consider another request of an additional $592,311. And you'll see, I'm sorry, 113, I reversed the numbers there. So you'll see in the memo and in the draft language that was provided, and I'll read this just so that the members of the public can hear it. And as I mentioned, this draft language was drafted by the Board of Education, by the superintendent of schools. They have had their Board of Education attorney review it. Now, the only thing that is different on here than what was forwarded to me by the Board of Education is that I requested, after consulting with our attorney, Ancona, that we add a date into this of June 30th, 2022. So originally the language just said after the finalization of the budget. I have requested that the Board of Ed and the chairman of the board has agreed that the language be amended to add that June 30th date into this agreement. So what this says, I'll read it formally into the record as draft language. Whereas the Newington Board of Education and the Newington Town Council want the final budget allocation to the board to not result in any staff layoffs. Whereas the Town Council wants to approve a budget that results in a mill rate decrease for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. Now, therefore, the Newington Board of Education, acting through the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Maureen Brummett, and the Town Council, acting through the Town Manager, Keith Chapman, agreed to the following memorandum of understanding. The Board of Education agrees to return $476,600 to the town after the finalization of the 2022-23 budget of the Town Council, but no later than the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, 2022. The Newington Town Council is scheduled to adopt the 2022-23 budget on or before April 19th, 2022. The Town Council agrees to restore $592,113 to the board's budget for 2022-23, which would be an increase of 2.46% over the current budget, 2021-2022. This will result in a final allocation for 2022-23 of $78,660,124. This agreement is only for the 2022-23 fiscal year and is not considered a precedent for future budgets. Just to add on, and it would be signed by the Superintendent of Schools and the Town Manager after both bodies act on agreeing to this memorandum of understanding. The Board of Education has added this language to their agenda for consideration at tomorrow evening's meeting. They may take action tomorrow. If there are further questions or concerns, then they will be looking to schedule a special meeting prior to the 19th when we meet, so that they would have already adopted the language. We could then adopt it prior to adopting our budget and mill rate. That would be the process that would happen should we choose to move forward with this draft. I did run this through the town manager and the finance director, and in full disclosure, the concerns raised were that where is this money coming from was one of the biggest questions, because originally the discussion was around health benefits. So this is not, even though that was the original thought and that's where the figure came from, this does not have anything to do with health benefits at this point. This is based on a surplus anticipated for the end of this fiscal year. When the health benefits monies do come in September, whatever that figure is, the Board of Education would retain their portion, as is the current agreement with them. I'm trying to think of what else I need to add. There is always talk of whether or not this creates a hole for next year, and I know that has come up. But this would be additional revenue, and we do anticipate that every year the Board of Ed does turn over surplus, so hopefully that would continue to happen. The other thing I would add is that this is merely guaranteeing the amount of 476, so that when we plan our budget and adopt our mill rate, this is something we can, that is a solid number that we've agreed on and that we can count on as revenue. That being said, if there's an additional surplus, like in past years when there was more than 476,000, the Board of Education is still bound to return any surplus to the town, should there be additional monies of surplus. I think I talked enough. I'm going to open it up for discussion now. Counselor Page.
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify. I think you just said it, just so, because I'm wanting to make sure I process it and anyone listening can process it, that in the event that the health benefits fund gets to a lower dollar amount between now and September, which it likely will, this is not related to that. So therefore,
Correct.
The Board of Ed would not be in a hole per se in having to give more than what they have remaining from their health benefits fund in September. I don't know if I'm asking that correctly.
So the health benefit, so it's a little bit different than what you're saying. It's not a health benefit fund. This is a credit that they get, right?
That's what I should have
So
said.
whatever the overage is, they'll keep that come September. Like that is our current practice. But in the past, we have made a similar agreement based on health benefits in the past related to budgets. I know that's happened a few times in history. So this is just a different way of looking at it, so that it essentially, if you look at the 592 that they're asking us, this would offset it by 476. So in terms of affecting the bottom line of our budget and our mill rate, it would really only be about $115 and change $1,000 that it would affect our budget overall.
And then just two other comments. One is about the mill rate. I know everybody's excited about keeping the mill rate lower.
Yeah.
If you look at the history of mill rate increases going back to, when did we start mill rate? 1936, 1938? Yeah. There are two that I could find where we've decreased, not we, somebody way back then decreased the mill rate. If you look at subsequent years, 5, 10, 15 years out, there were 6% increases, there were 3% increases, there were 7% increases. So I know times are tough, so there's rationale for mill rate lower, but I just think, again, if we think longer term, we're inevitably going to have increases in our mill rate. And this party won't continue forever, although I appreciate it right now, as most residents do, are paying more for gas and oil and all the other expenditures. The other just question I have, because I don't know enough about this, so someone enlighten me. For years, all I've heard is the overage and the debate between the town side and the school side. Why not have two separate health accounts? Wouldn't that stop the bickering over this dollar amount and the overage and what everybody does with the overage?
So essentially our health benefits plan, we are in one plan together, and that gets us a much better rate. There was a memorandum of understanding. I think everybody was provided it a while back. I'm hoping you got a copy of it as well.
1996.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was signed basically saying that when the overages come back at that point, it made sense for the council that was sitting at that point, that the Board of Education would keep those overages if there were any, and the council keeps ours and puts ours into the health benefits fund to fund for next year and subsequent years. And so that is something that I will be bringing forward as an agenda item following budget. However, after reviewing it recently, if you look at the draft, at the language from 1994, when that original memorandum was created, if either party wants to get out of that arrangement, you have to provide the other party with 75 days notice prior to the beginning of a fiscal year.
But this current deal arrangement existing since 94 is to the, not only the town side, but more importantly to our taxpayers. This is a deal for our taxpayers because it's a larger group, you're saying, a larger.
That agreement has nothing to do with it. That agreement is merely that the Board of Ed gets the credit in September. If there's a credit, they get to keep it, is basically what that memo has to do with. The idea of going for insurance together was just something that the board and the town had agreed upon, and they get a better rate overall.
And usually with a bigger,
So
with
that's
a bigger
good for our
pool of,
taxpayers.
with a bigger
Right.
pool of people, you get a better rate because you have a bigger pool of,
Right.
of insured people. And then depending how their age and where they live and that kind of things, that you can get some benefits. And we have changed our insurance recently to include wellness visits and those things, like most carriers are incentives to be, to be healthier. And so we have kind of made those changes.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Donahue?
Plus the board is never on the hook for any shortages,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
They don't, if they have a shortage, they don't pay that, the town pays that,
That is correct.
right? So
Well,
there's no.
the town provides the board with every dollar, right? The taxpayers do that.
Correct.
You have to look at it though, once the dollars get passed to the Board of Education, we don't have any say over how those dollars are allocated.
Who or how, and maybe this is too long for tonight, so we don't have to get into it, but who or how is it determined each year what that dollar amount is that goes into the Board of Ed side health expenditure account?
Right now, the agent of record comes forward with recommendations, but I know that the finance directors then bring forward their recommendations.
From each side, and they come together and agree on a number?
I don't know that they agree. I think for our side, Janet brings forward the number for our budget and Lou brings forward the number to the Board of Ed for their budget.
And that's
Well,
based,
somebody's got to agree on something.
well, that's based on the agent record will say
Janet
what
on-
other
is
claims,
Janet on the call?
what's the potential for claims from the future? What's,
Okay.
what's your population look like?
I can, Janet Murphy's on the call. Janet, do you want to touch base on that? Am I correct in what I said, or do you want to correct me a little bit?
You're correct. As per the agreement that we have, the health benefit fund agreement, the Board of Ed is required to budget what is suggested or agreed to with the agent of record.
Okay.
And that's the agent of record is the person who's the expert from that respective health insurance company?
He's the actuary.
Or-
Sort of-
Janet, you can answer that.
He's our insurance broker. So
So
yes.
He's our broker. Okay,
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
thank you very much.
Okay. You all set?
Good, thank you.
Okay. So counselors, we're not looking to take action on this evening. My recommendation would be that The Board of Ed will discuss and possibly vote tomorrow night. As I mentioned, if they do not vote tomorrow night, they will be scheduling a meeting. My understanding from the chairman is that they will schedule a special meeting prior to the 19th because their next meeting after would be the 20th, and that would be too late for our purposes. So if they don't take action tomorrow night, they'll be taking action hopefully by the 18th. And then on the 19th, when we come back and we are ready to make our adjustments, my recommendation would be we add this to the agenda prior to adjustments. So we adopt the agreement and then we can make the necessary adjustments based on the agreement. Okay, I'm seeing a nodding of heads. We're good with this one? All right, we're gonna move on then to our next item, which is public participation. This is a special meeting, so public participation is restricted to agenda items only. So anything that we've discussed this evening can be spoken on by the public. We have a 3-minute time limit, and if you are in the Zoom application, you can raise your hand in the participants window. If you are in our room, you're welcome to come up if you'd like to speak. And you can also, if you're on your phone through Zoom, *9 will allow you to raise your hand so we know you want to be recognized. We have 2 folks. The first is Ms. Lyons.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Ms. Lyons, are you there?
Yes, I heard somebody speaking and I thought I was interrupting someone. Rose Lyons. Okay, Rose Lyons, 46 Elton Drive. Well, I'm glad to see that you're discussing the Permanent Municipal Building Committee. I'm also giving myself a headache listening to the discussion around the table, having attended multiple meetings over at least 4 or 5 years of the Town Hall Reno Committee. I've seen every case scenario that you could possibly see. And I've been to other smaller committee meetings too with streetscapes and things like that. And I have to agree with Councilor Bedraco that there's always been some staff person there. And if I had a vote, I would vote Jeff Barron, employee of the century, because he put up with the Town Hall Reno for God knows how long. And with all due respect to the people that are on the committees, the volunteers, their political appointments, most of them, and I don't care whether you have a vested interest in Parks and Rec or anything else, you also have a loyalty to the party that you have been put on that committee for. But anyway, in any case, I think there needs to be some staff person to keep people in line, to let them know what they can and they cannot do. For example, on the Town Hall Reno, I remember one night being there and there was a discussion about windows being put in the gymnasium, and there was not any money to be used for that. And it was offered by Parks and Rec that they would pay for it, but they had to be reminded that they could not pay for it with their CIP funds without town council approval, to the best of my recollection. Things like this, I think there needs to be someone there. And like I say, with all due respect to even the professionals that are going to be appointed to this committee, if they're not versed on what they can do and cannot do, there has to be someone there to give them some direction. That's my own opinion. Like I say, after 5, 6 years, whatever, of listening to these various meetings, you have all different case scenarios that come up, and there's always questions that the board members have to go to staff to answer. So I'm hoping that somewhere in that draft, there's going to be some provision for a staff member to be there for them to ask questions of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. All right. Next is Chris DeFran. I'm thinking that's Chris DeFrancesco.
That's right.
All right, go ahead and state your name and address for the record, and then you're on.
Chris DeFrancesco, 255 Beacon Street. I'd like to speak to the budget and the superintendent's budget for the school system. I'm a proud product of Newington Public Schools, Newington High, class of 91. And I'm even prouder parent of a John Wallace Middle School student, 8th grader. Our daughter has thrived in our fantastic school system. And the school system is one of the reasons I moved back to Newington when I got married. It's one of the reasons we stayed. I'm grateful Newington historically has made education a high priority. Now, support from home is a necessary component of a child's education. And whether we want to admit it or not all households today can provide that needed support for various reasons. And that's not the school's fault, but it ends up being the school's problem. The schools will take on the additional burdens, whether it's making sure children have a meal, dealing with behavioral problems, conflict resolution, respect for others, in general, sharing the land, things that, of course, are reinforced at school, but ideally are modeled at home by involved parents. Dr. Brabant, I'm sure already has made clear the significant growth in special education needs over the last several years. It's not a judgment, it's not a complaint, it's a reality. When we call upon our school system to educate all students, and it should, and it does, but when we complain about the cost of education going up, we have to acknowledge the financial strain of this worthy and necessary investment. Now, I'm blessed that my daughter is not required special education, but I want to live in a community where these needs are met because we all benefit in the long run. And more importantly, it's the right thing to do. Does government not exist to assist its most vulnerable? And whether it's special ed or free reduced lunches, social work support for our students, or dealing with behavioral problems, it seems we continue to ask more and more of our schools and educators every year. And especially the last 2 years, we should be supporting, thanking, and acknowledging them, not nickeling and diming them and debating their value, especially considering how our educators had to reinvent their profession over the last 2 years. There could not be a worse time to go in the opposite direction when it comes to supporting them. Is that what we're willing to do in order to take credit for lowering the mill rate? For those of you who are, I ask you to seriously reconsider. Dr. Brummett's budget request is more than reasonable. It's a fair compromise from where she started. Not that we should ever compromise when it comes to investing in our schools, which is an investment in our children, our families, and our community, present and future. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your service to our town.
Thank you, Mr. DeFrancisco. I do see Ms. Lyons' hand up again, but unfortunately, we do have our council rules only allow one. Okay,
No.
all right, I just want to make sure. Rose, if you have any other questions, you know how to get a hold of us. All right. I'm just going to give it a second to see if there's anyone in the room that wants to speak. No, okay. And I don't see any other hands up. So given that, we will move on to remarks by counselors. Counselor Page?
Yeah, just a couple, in part in response to the recent caller, but in general, I continue to be very concerned about and look forward to discussing more of our reading scores in our schools. Because of the pandemic, reading instruction has suffered when children aren't there or they're working remotely. It's happened in every town and hamlet from here to California. And I just want to make sure that we're doing right by our in our budgeting process to support curriculum instruction and all the other supports necessary to help kids catch up. And it's going to be a while because we know when reading instruction falls back a year, it can take 3 or 4 years to catch it up. The other comment, and I've said it before, I know that many people here do share this, our significant concern for the mental health of our kids and everybody, but we're talking about schools. I'm talking about schools. And in response to the pandemic, we're seeing more anxiety, depression, thoughts of self-harm, drug use, et cetera. I want to make sure in our budget that we're supporting the mental health needs of our students. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other counselors? Counselor Rowell?
Yeah, I had actually written a note to myself, similar to what Counselor Page had just stated, that my concern is that the behavioral health and social services that are provided in our school system are not negatively impacted by the budget. So that will be something that I'm going to keep an eye on and I'm very concerned over. And the second is something that I would like to propose or suggest is with everything that we've been seeing in the news, the horrific photos and what's going on in the Ukraine, I'd like to suggest a resolution coming from the town council in support of the people of Ukraine. And I don't know if anyone else, I know Councilor Mankey and I just briefly discussed this. I don't know if anyone else has any comment.
If you have thoughts on that, if you have any draft language or anything, if you want to forward it to the agenda setting committee, then we can certainly.
Okay, maybe James and I can work on something.
Yeah, I would just support that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, we can go ahead
I
and
had
put
my
that on the agenda.
suggestion, but I'm saving public.
Okay.
All right.
It won't go into the resolution either, I don't think.
Probably not.
Any other council comment or question? Deputy Mayor Bedrejko?
I was, I didn't realize that, I thought we were limited to what was on the agenda, but thank you for opening it up a little bit to something more. Keith, I know you're still on the line. There was a lot of activity yesterday, apparently captured on Facebook at the corner of Fenn Road and East Cedar, where there are like over 100 ATV vehicles and whatever. and it seemed, it got kind of out of hand and dangerous. And I was looking all day on the news. Normally the media would jump on that. I kept checking in all day and I didn't see anything on it, on any of the local channels, whatever. Can you kind of give us an update?
Yeah, apparently they were coming through Newington. There was over 100 of them, and they ended up down at the gas station at Fenn Road. And they got a little out of control, but fortunately, no one was injured. There were, I believe, a couple of people arrested, and they departed quickly, and that was the end of it.
But our police department was involved as well, right?
New Britain and Newington, yes, both.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Rada?
Yes, and this is for Mr. Chapman. That we received a text and we have had information regarding the fire at what had been, what is it?
Best
Market. And if you have any follow-up with that?
No, I talked to the fire chief. I think I put into the text to you guys that it was related to the solar panels on the roof. Apparently there was water, standing water that penetrated the electrical wiring that hooks the solar panels to one another and so forth, and short circuited. And there was no damage done to the building. However, yeah, I think you saw the pictures. There's probably 8 or 10 solar panels that were destroyed.
And no harm to any of the firefighters that were there?
No, they did a great job.
Good. Okay. Just in response to the last caller, I just wanted to assure Chris that we are, or I am, extremely aware of the needs of the professionals in our schools and what it's looked like over the past 2 years. I am an educator myself. I'm a speech and language pathologist in a school. And you are correct in saying that our role has been redefined over the past 2 years, and the expectations put on staff members, teachers, paraprofessionals, has changed dramatically in how we operate and what we need to do in providing services for our students. And as you mentioned, there are instances, and I'm speaking from my personal experience, not necessarily for Newington Public Schools, because I don't work for them. But I know that students were struggling if they were not able to be in person at school, if they chose not to be for the additional year. But there are, I'll just remind everybody, there are ESSER funds that were provided to Newington Public Schools, and I know they did hire some individuals that they saw fit in addressing those needs. And so I would just assure members of the public that there are being changes made and staffing changes based on the availability of those funds, at least for 2 years, in order to address needs. And I won't go into specifics because I don't know exactly how the Board of Ed chose to use those funds, but those funds were made available from the government. So I'm hoping that we are addressing those needs. And I know those are 2-year positions and we'll have to kind of readdress. We'll see if the government comes forward with further funding based on needs. And if not, and when those positions end, we will have to see where we're at. But I know those positions are coming to an end in 2 years. But I know that I share your concern for where our students are at, and I'm confident that our Board of Education will continue to move kids forward using our budgetary amount as well as those ESSER funds in meeting the needs of our students. And I'll be the first one to say that, yes, we need to make sure we maintain our staff, but money doesn't always equate to performance. And I say that all the time because I've worked in schools that were, perhaps less funded, and I've worked in schools that are more funded, and that doesn't always equate to performance of students or staff. School climate, school culture, all of that weighs in. And so I think we're very fortunate here in Newington. I too am a product of Newington Public Schools, as many of us are around this table. And our schools have done a remarkable job over the years, and I know they will continue to do so. And I will say that in my conversations with at least 5 of our board members, they're very confident that the school district will continue to move forward with the MOU that we had discussed this evening and with that level of funding. So I'm confident in their judgment as well. All right, I'm done. Anybody else? All right, we are at the end of our agenda, so I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Mackey, second by Counselor Rada. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We stand adjourned 8-0. Council Camillo absent at 9:04.